So after you came out of the interview room, you were content that you have kind of nailed it.
Yes, I felt quite good because I'd had a myriad of experiences before that as well, ups and downs, good and bad interviews. So I
Right.
knew that this would be pretty nice. There was no point which was a specific pain point where I really messed up on anything. I didn't feel like that at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the last in my slot. So before entering the interview room, I'd already kind of co-signed ki, okay, chalo, if it doesn't go well, it doesn't go well. I'm already fatigued, etc. But
Okay.
once I sat there, locked in, fight or fight kicked in, it went great. So after that, I felt a huge relief that the best calls interview has been done satisfactorily.
Right, right. So, since you have converted FMS also, what two, three
Mhm.
parameters have you chosen? Have you thought about while choosing AMC?
Right. So the debate between FMS and IMC, sometimes even Lucknow, revolves around a few parameters. One
Right.
of them is, of course, return on investment, right?
Mm.
FMS is 3 lakhs compared to the 25, 27 plus for the IIMs. So
Right.
that's a huge factor for a lot of people. I know personally for myself, it's not a huge factor because my parents are willing to sponsor my education and money isn't too much of an issue. So I am very grateful and lucky to have that. So the ROI factor did not really compel me so much. And beyond that, I personally would really want a campus life.
Mm.
So FMS kind of is infamous for not having that much of a campus, and the interviews are in the FMS campus itself. So I saw it firsthand. It's one building essentially compared to IIM Calcutta's huge campus with the ponds and all the facility. So that was a big pull. Beyond that, of course, I feel like most candidates by now know that the ABC tag kind of has a different brand value compared to FMS.
Right.
Especially, at least in MBA circles, a lot of people will know that FMS is a top college in the same sector tier. But for day-to-day people and just in general, I feel like ABC has that name that FMS you might have to explain to someone that, oh yeah,
Very
it is
true.
also a top five college, whereas ABC kind of stands for itself.
Right.
And even within the MBA circle, I think the Holy Trinity has its own brand value, and I think it'll pay dividends, especially in the first 5 to 10 years of your career.
Right.
So considering all of these things, for me, it was a clear choice from the start.
That's very true. So, how did you go about preparing for the interviews?
Right. So the interviews, the questions there, I think revolve mainly around three subcategories. One of them is HR questions, which is basically the questions that you should expect some variation of in every interview. These are
Right.
questions like tell me about yourself, why MBA, how does your branch in your bachelor's help you in your MBA, how are you transitioning, stuff
Right.
along those lines. Why are you doing it without WorkX or explanation about your WorkX if you have that. So questions about your profile that you can kind of expect some variation of in almost every interview. So having those completely prepped and polished and practiced so that you know what you're going to say and it comes off fluently. That's the HR aspect. After that is the general knowledge aspect, right? Which within it there are kind of two subcategories. One is like knowing the mundane things, right? Like who your CM is of your state, who the defense minister is, who the finance minister is.
Right.
For example, a New Delhi CM was elected, right, with Rekha Gupta.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to know that has happened. So like these kind of names and these trivia, fun fact kind of things which have objective answers that you have to know.
Right.
And the second aspect of GK is like current affairs, where you have to give out an opinion and
Mm.
give out some new thought about it. For me, one really common one coming back from the US was the Donald Trump second term and how the tariffs will affect the US and the global economy at large. So questions like that, questions like about the union bill, right? Pros and cons, how that will affect like consumption, etc. Geopolitical questions, questions about Russia, Ukraine, whatever else. These are the questions where you have to kind of have an opinion. Of course, you don't want to give too polarized of an answer, but
Right.
at the same time, you don't want to tread a line so thin that like you look like you really don't want to pick a side and you don't know too much. You
Right.
have to have a fleshed out opinion while making sure it's balanced and diplomatic. So that's GK. And of course, lastly is ACADS. This will vary person to person depending on what you've studied in the bachelor's. For me, it was statistics, so predominantly that regression, collinearity, etc. All of these topics that I'd kind of done in my bachelor's and left there. I had to revamp and brush up on again. So covering these three aspects, I think, left me relatively secure. But then again, In interviews, it can literally go anywhere. They can ask you any random question. They can ask you what cities you will cross if you take a train from here to here. They can ask you guesstimate questions, right? They can ask you anything. So you can't have everything covered. Beyond that, of course, you practice, give mock interviews so that you're composed, right? You're used to giving interviews itself. I think having that practice helps make sure that your performance is well, even if you do not know certain answers. Your composure matters a lot, especially in stress interviews.
True,
So
true.
that was my approach.
So, how did Mindworks help you in the interview preparation?
So Mindworks was great. I gave a couple of mock interviews in Mindworks. There were, of course, faculty and there was current MBA students who recently had the experience that had conducted these. So that was handy. And after all of them, of course, I'd get a feedback as to things I could improve upon. Getting yourself in an informal scenario where the stakes aren't that high, but still doing the things that you're set to do, it kind of gives you a good time to reflect on how you're performing.
Right.
It gives you a chance to look at your weak areas and strong areas. Beyond that, we also had practice group discussions. So only two of my calls had group discussions at all. But
Right.
for that, of course, you get less practice for it because not every call has it, but it still matters. So it helped a lot to have to go through that group discussion process with Mindworks beforehand.
Great, great.
So yeah, these were primarily it.
So, any final tip for people who are starting CAT 25 preparation now? Since you scored a great percentile also, what should
Yeah. As I'd said in my other video as well, I think mocks, personally, I'm very biased towards mocks. I think they'll be your best friend in this journey.
right?
Give as many mocks as you humanly can while still analyzing them. Go through the sections, right? Beyond that, I'd say while you give the mocks, segment each section into smaller chunks of time so that you can kind of keep track of how much progress you've made in a section with those timestamps so that you're not like rushing too many questions in the last 5 minutes or so. um, Other than that, of course, stay confident. There'll be ups and downs in your journey, so you have to keep your head held high. There'll be mocks where you score very low. I know I did. So you have to work through all that and stay motivated through that. Beyond that, some interview tips also that I might want to give you is, um, of course, the question thing that I said, show your interest in the college. Beyond that, speak slowly, take your time to answer. Do not rush into answers too quick. I myself, this was a weak area for me, especially with my ISBYL interview. There were a couple of times that the interviewer himself had to say that, no, think about the answer for a couple of minutes. They like that you are giving a well thought out answer, and time always seems to go by faster in your head than it
Right.
actually does.
True.
Don't hesitate to take a second and slow down. Beyond that, one last thing is completely feel free to admit when you do not know. You do not want to confidently give wrong answers and act like you know something when you do not. In fact, if you're making a guess, ask if you can make the guess or at least make it clear that I do not know this. I'll have to look into it, but here is what I would guess if I had to make a guess. So making that distinction every time you answer when you're unsure about it could go a long way because they wouldn't like candidates who are arrogant and still wrong, right? So
Very true.
these are some for future aspirants.
Very true. Very true. Thanks, Ishan, for sharing your experience with us and guiding the aspirants. I'm sure it will help them in their prep journey. And best wishes to you on IIM Calcutta. I am
Thank you so much.
sure you will do wonders there too. And feel free to reach out to us in case you need any help from our side. Thank you. All the best.
Thank you, sir.